So in the last few sessions, we looked at joins, right? And we looked at what is an inner join, what are outer joins, what are the types of outer joins, and we looked at a few examples. So we covered these concepts more conceptually, right? We looked at a couple of tables, and then we looked at how the results would look like. What we're going to do now is actually write some queries. We're going to look at how inner joins work, how to join two tables and stuff like that. So let's actually take the same examples that we covered in our slides. And what I'll do is I'll actually create those tables, insert some values, join those tables, and so on and so forth. So some of the queries that we look at here, like something like creating a table, inserting values and stuff like that, might be more repetitive for you. So if you feel it's too boring, feel free to forward it until the point where you actually reach the joins part or the outer joins part, and so on and so forth. So let's get started. So when we looked at joins, we looked at something like this, right? We looked at two tables, and we said that when we join these two tables using a common column, what we get is the common rows between those two tables. So precisely, let's do that. Let's create two tables. One let's call it like my employee or something, another my salary. And let's just insert 3 rows in it. And once we insert them, let's look at how an inner join output will look like. All right. So let's go ahead and create a table. And I'm going to call this table as, say, my employee. So I'll say create table my employee, and let's say it just has 3 columns in it, and I'm going to call these columns as employee ID, and that can be an integer. Then you can have a first name that can be a variable character 20, and then a last name. Simple stuff. So just 3 columns, and just want to make sure that I spell things correctly here. Okay, now let's just put all these in our AdventureWorks database, and later on, we can remove them. So I'm going to create this table. Oops, and let me make sure. So these are 2 options in SSMS wherein you can export the results to a file or a grid. We'll just export it to a grid. All right, so we have a table. Now let's go ahead and insert some rows into it. So insert into my employees. Values, and then what do we want to insert? Say 1 Michael Scott. All right, and I'm going to copy it 3 times now just to make sure we insert 3 rows, and then I'll have to make sure that I change these values. So let me do that real quickly. And all right, so we have a table and we have about 3 rows in it. Let's just have a look at that table. Oh, there's an object, and let's go ahead and insert 3 rows and say select star from my employee. All right, we have 3 tables, 3 rows and a single table. All right, so now next what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing for my salary. And again, if you feel that these are too repetitive, go ahead and feel free to skip this part. I'm creating a table called my salary. I'm just making it consistent, and then again it's going to have an employee ID, and that can be an integer, and then it's going to have, say, salary, right? And I'm just giving it a float. So, you can include decimals if you want, but that's not a point here. And again, the same thing, insert into my salary, and then the value should be, for employee ID 1, I'm giving him $10,000. And then for 2 and 3, I'll give them like 8,000 and 6,000, something like that. All right, so we have a table and we have inserted 3 rows, and then let's do select star from my salary. So these are the 3 rows. All right, so pretty much we have the same table that we looked at in our example, right? And what I'm going to do is, just so that you can look at both the tables together, I'm going to paste them one below the other. So these are the 2 tables. Now, what will happen when we join both these tables via the employee ID? So it's going to give you all the common rows that both these tables have. So let's look at that. So I'll start off with select star, and again, I'm just saying we're choosing everything, but we'll go ahead and change this later. And I'm going to say from my employee, and generally we have to give an alias here. So the alias name can be anything, A, B, C, anything that you like. And now I'm going to say inner join, employee inner join with my second table, that's my salary. And again, I'm going to give alias over here. Once I inner join both these tables, I need to also tell them what is the common column between these tables. So can be A dot employee ID equal to B dot employee ID. Simple stuff. I forgot something. It's on A dot employee ID equal to B dot employee ID. Perfect. Now I'm going to remove this star, and I'm going to say that I need the first name and the last name from my first table and the salary from my second table. And incidentally, my first table is referred by the alias A. So if I do A dot first name, A dot last name, and my salary is in my second table, which has an alias as B, so I can say B dot salary. So imagine that you are joining 2 or more tables. You can easily refer to the various columns between these tables via this particular alias dot column name. Okay, let's execute this entire thing. You see that this is select star from my employee, this is select star from my salary, and this is how it joined. So three rows in both the tables, and the resultant is 3 rows in the last table because there were 3 common rows. So one thing to note again here is inner joins means it'll only give you the rows which are common between these 2 tables. All right, great. So we have some amount of knowledge in inner joins. Let's proceed and look at some outer joins. So I'm going to start with left outer join, and we're going to look at what we discussed when we mentioned about outer joins and left outer joins. When we discussed our left outer joins, we said that we have 2 tables, right? The first table is what we just created as my employee, and the second table is something that we'll create. But if you see that the first table has 3 rows and the second table has only 2 rows, what left outer join does is it takes every row from your left table and it takes all the rows from your right table that is common with your left table, and whatever is not common, it just marks as at null. So this will be the result. You see that the row number 1, 2 are common, so you find data from both the tables, whereas the third row is only available in your left table, so it could not find a corresponding match in the right table, hence it replaced by null. Let's see how it looks like when we write a query. All right, so we have our employee table. We just need to create our phone table. So I'm going to say create table my phone, and again, let's just keep it simple. Let's say employee ID as integer and phone number as integer. Okay, and then let's go ahead and insert 2 rows. Insert into my phone values can be 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 2, something like that, right? And then we say insert into my phone values for my second employee. All right, so we have a phone table. We have inserted 2 rows into it, and let's look at the employee and phone table one below the other and see how it looks like. All right, so we have the phone table, we have the employee table, and let's see how the syntax looks like and how the results look like when we do employee left join with phone. So the syntax is pretty much the same. Select star from my employee, and again you need to give an alias, so I'm giving it as A, And this time, instead of an inner join, I'm going to write left join with my phone, and I'm going to give it an alias on a.employee ID, because that's the common row, equal to b.employee ID. And instead of star, I need first name, then a dot last name, and I need a dot b dot salary or phone number. Okay, so you see that we're joining the first table with the second table using a left join, and let's see what it gives us. This is your first table, this is your second table. It could match the first two rows, employee ID 1 and 2, employee ID 1 and 2, but it didn't find an entry in the third row, for the third row, employee ID 3, so it replaced it by null. So basically what you're saying is, whatever is in the left part of this clause, take every row. And if you find a match, well and good. If you don't find a match, put a null. That's the whole concept of this. So the same thing also applies for right joins. So let's just extend that same concept in right joins. So when we discussed right joins, what did we say? We said that we have two tables, and it's kind of the opposite of a left join. You see that in your table 2, you have 4 rows. In your table 1, you have 2 rows. And out of those 2 rows, both the rows are present in both tables. That is, those are the common rows, right? So when you do table 1 right join with table 2, it basically says take everything from table 2. And if you find a match with table 1, well and good. If not, put a null in the corresponding cells. So employee ID 1 and 2 common, yes, you got data from both, we're good. Employee ID 3 and 4, there is data only in the table 2, in the right table. So take that and put nulls for your left tables. So let's look at this. So we have the employee table right now, and we just need to create one more table called, say, parking, and then we can test this out. Perfect. So let's go ahead and create a parking table. So create table my parking, and then again I'm just going to create some columns here, employee ID integer, and then let's say parking spot can be varchar of 20. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to again insert some values. Insert into my parking. Values can be, for employee ID 1, the parking spot can be A1, and for employee ID 2, the parking can be A2, right? So let's look at the employee and the phone and the parking tables side by side. Execute this, insert 2 rows, and then select star from my parking. All right, so table 1 employee, table 2 parking. What we are going to do, just for clarity, let me do it this way actually, so that you can look in the same order. Okay, so what we're going to do is select star from parking or my parking and give it an alias A, but this time we're going to say right join with my employee B on, what is a common column is a.employee ID equal to b.employee ID. And then I'll go ahead and say from my first table I need the parking spots, from my second table I need the first name and the last name. Let's look at how this looks like. All right, the first table, second table, we saw that the two, when you say right join, everything from your right table is accounted for. Whatever it found a match, A1, A2, it filled in those, and whatever it did not, it basically put a null over there. So it's kind of, you know, if you understand left join, it's opposite and so on and so forth.